In this video, we're going to continue our use of Microsoft Excel to calculate standard deviation, and what we're going to do in this step is we're going to use our conceptual equations over that you see here on the right hand side in these images. So picking up where we had left off, we had initially calculated some descriptive statistics, which always starts with the sample size, the average, and the standard deviation. Because I'm going to use these equations here, I'm going to perform one more calculation, and I'm going to enter that calculation right in these two cells. So I'm going to give that a label of df, and this is the degree of freedom, and that's the denominator in our conceptual equation for what is the variance and the standard deviation. So to do that, I just need to subtract 1 from the sample size. So I'm going to hit the equal sign. I find my sample size that I'd calculated previously in this cell, so I'm just going to click this cell here, and you notice 9 does not show up here, but the cell number that contains the value. And I'm going to hit the hyphen, subtract 1, hit enter, and now I have a sample size of 9, which will give us a degree of freedom of 8. And what I like to do in Excel, and oftentimes this is not recommended, especially if we're working between different software applications, but if I'm going to work entirely within Microsoft Excel, I'm going to highlight these and just either bold them and give these values a different color so that it gives me a visual distinction from the raw data. The next step is to calculate the deviation, and so the first equation here is variance, and to read the equation we always read the equation from the most inner part and we work our way outside. So we see that we have a raw value here which would correspond to each of these values individually, and we subtract the average which we had calculated a little bit earlier. So I want to give this column a heading which I'm going to title deviation. And I hit enter, and I've got a typo there. Accidentally clicked an I. So now I want to perform the mathematical operation of 34 subtract 28.888 repeated. So I type the equal sign, and I click the cell that contains the value for the first entry, which is the X. And once again here, the number 34 doesn't show up, but the cell that contains 34 shows up. And then I subtract the average, and I don't want to type that value in here, but I want to click the cell where I had previously used an Excel function to calculate the average. And so I just click this value, and I hit enter. And we have a deviation of 5.11 repeated, so the first test taker score deviates from the average by a value of approximately 5.1. Now I want to repeat this for all the other scores, but I want to do it very quickly and efficiently, which I'm going to pull down on the bottom right hand corner of this cell to perform and carry forward all of the calculations. Now when I do that, Excel will carry forward B2 to B3 to B4, so on and so forth, but it will do the same thing for B13, and I don't want to do that. I want to lock in the value contained in B13. To do that, I go to the formula bar here. I put the cursor in front of the first letter B here, which is our column, and I shift 4, which is a dollar sign, and then I move over to the 13, which is the row, and I shift 4 and I put another dollar sign. So what the dollar sign tells Excel to do is to lock in the value in column B and row 13, which is that cell, so that when I do pull the cursor downward, it will not carry forward B13, but will carry forward B2. So then I just hit the enter, and you see we have the same deviation value. But now I click on this cell once again. I move my cursor over to the bottom right hand corner until it changes image to an addition sign, a plus sign, and I just pull downward. And now we have the deviation scores for each person from the average. And to check if this is a correct approach, I'll perform another calculation in this cell right here. And if I add up all of these values, it should equal 0. So I'll hit the equal sign. I'll type in the Excel function SUM, which is the addition of an array of numbers. I'll shift 9, and now I'll highlight all of the cells that I wish to perform an addition operation over, and so this comes up as C2 full colon C10. I could have easily have typed in these terms, or I could have just highlighted. And then I have to close it with a shift 0, and I hit enter, and we have a value of negative 3.553 times E negative 15, and E stands for exponent, which means that we are moving the decimal place for the negative 3.553 to the left, negative 15 times. So this is going to be a value that's very close to 0, and because of rounding errors, that's going to be good enough. And this ends the second part of this video on our way to calculating standard deviation manually with Microsoft Excel.